Anna from Savvy Cat Realty speaking to you today about frauds in the real estate market of Portugal. I'm going to go over both things to be aware of in rentals and when buying. And I'm going to start with rentals because it's much simpler, while in buying there is a lot of things that you need to look into. So first of all, before we start with that and wait a bit for people to join me, as you know, you can ask questions live while I'm talking, and I will come back to you and answer you live. If they are on topic, I'll answer right away. If they are off topic, I'll come back to you at the end, so it doesn't interrupt my line of thought. So some news about what I've been doing this week. We have been working on a website redesign, and I kind of rewritten the whole thing. I have that problem when I start something, I just go crazy. So I've been rewriting my all my website this week, and I also decided to create some intermediated services between the rental packs and the buying packs. Some of you know, if you have been following us, we used to have a basic rental service that was indeed quite basic. And now I created 2 more rental services that provide more service, but are not yet on the buying packages, so are somewhere in between. And it's also because a lot of people that do rentals also have ask us for assistance with visas. And in this way, they can do both on the same package, and it's much more simple. Thank you, Carrie. I hope you will enjoy it. I think it will go live somewhere in the next few days. I already finished my part. Now my content manager is going over the design, and I'm excited to see how it come out. And I think it will be better organized. And I will love to hear feedback from you guys on what you think about and suggestions of things we can improve. We always love to hear from you. And once again, feel free to ask questions during the live. I will come back to you if they are on topic. If they're not, I answer at the end. And if you are not watching this live and rewatch, as you know, all of our videos go into the live tab, video tab on our Facebook page. I'm forgetting how to speak. So all of our videos go into the video tab on the Facebook page, and you can check them there. And most of them also end up on YouTube, although they go through some editing by my contact manager. So I was saying that if you are watching this offline, you can still leave your questions, and we will come back to you as soon as we see the notifications. So I think that's all I have to update you. Oh, I have also some interesting things. As you know, I keep going up and down the country. So I'm going to Algarve next week to finish a transaction that is happening there with some clients. So very exciting. I'm going to ask them permission to share some of the things. We are doing some really nice gift baskets with some personalized goods for their new home, and we are very excited about it. That has been a whole thing in the company. We are been making those little things, so I hope they allow us to show you guys how those will be. And if so, you will be hearing from us next week with the cute things that we've been making for our clients that just bought a house in the Algarve. So going into the topic for today, frauds in the Portuguese real estate market. I will start with the rentals because it's quite much simpler, while in buying there is a lot of things to look into. So the first very obvious thing is to not pay anyone before you have a contract. And this can be a bit trickier than you imagine, because in situations with alojamento local, it's actually not legally required a contract, because alojamento local operates as a business, which means that it pretty much is as a hotel. You don't really do a contract before you go to a hotel, do you? You only get the receipt once you leave or once you make the payment. And that's exactly what happens with alojamento local. You don't really get a contract, but you are definitely supposed to get a receipt. And alojamento local is mandatory to be registered under the portal. I will leave the link for the portal later because I should have put that here, but I forgot. Or someone in my team, if someone is watching, please put the link there for the verification of alojamento locais. In truth, there is a lot of people that do alojamento local under the table. So alojamento local is basically holiday rentals. In Portugal, you have two ways to rent. You have the long-term contracts and then you have the holiday rentals. In order to do the holiday rentals, you have to have this license, and it basically operates as a business. And you can do contracts of any length. So you can do short-term things like a week and a day, and you can also do contracts of a year. Of course, most people that do holiday rentals don't want to do long-term contracts because it's much less profitable. And the reason that long-term rentals cannot do short-term holiday, like a month or so, it's because there is a stamp tax that is part of a percentage of the contract value. So let's imagine you want to rent a house for 1,500 euros and for a month. If a person that doesn't have it in alojamento local wanted to register that contract, they will be paying a stamp tax of 150 euros plus the regular fees. And it would only be for a month. That stamp tax is per contract, so they pay exactly the same whether that contract lasts a month or lasts 10 years. So most people don't want to do short-term contracts because of this. It is also very hard to do short-term contracts on a regular rental regime because there is a law that says that the contracts need to be 3 months or more. If they are less than 3 months, they have to have a clause of it being for business or holiday purposes. And it's a bit more complicated legally. So in truth, most of the people that do long-term rentals don't want to do short-term. They just, unless it's a holiday rental, it's just not profitable for the owner to do short-term. And that leaves us with a problem that I face a lot in my business, that is the medium-term rentals, because I work with a lot of people that want to rent for like a month or two because they're just exploring the locations and so on. This is very hard because most of the people that are willing to do this are holiday rentals, and obviously that ends up being much more expensive. And on the other hand, if it's on the high season, they may even not do it. So all this because I was saying that it's rather complicated about the not paying anything before you have a contract. Because if it's a long-term rental, yes, you need to have a contract, but if it's an alojamento local, you just need to have a receipt. Either way, the way you can make sure you don't have this kind of problems is, if it's a long-term rental, have a contract. If it's alojamento local, make sure you check the number of the register of that establishment before you make the purchase or any payments, and request a receipt. So, Carrie is saying, what are some of the key things renters should look for a long-term rental contract? Are there much different American rental contracts? I don't think there are much different. One of the things that is kind of a problem for a lot of Americans that I work with is that the standards here for renting are kind of low. So people rent properties that aren't exactly in a good state. And because the market at the moment, there is a lot more demand than offer, what happens is landlords get to take their pick. And it's very important to not rent a property before you actually visited it and checked it, because unfortunately, in many cases, the conditions will not be worth the price. But because there is so much demand and so little offer, a lot of people end up submitting to those kind of cases and just renting things that they know aren't that great. because there's just no other option. And that happens especially in the big cities. So in places like Lisbon and Porto, things can get a bit crazy because we do a rental service. My Lisbon agent is the one that has the most problems, because often we call for an ad hours after it was posted, and then we go to the client and we say, oh, look, we found this, we need to go check it fast. And by the time that the client comes back to us, the apartment was already rented. So this can be a problem. And because of this, lots of people take advantage of this. And this is something you need to be quite careful of, is people trying to push you into bidding wars, so to say. So basically they go, because they know there is this kind of demand, they go like, okay, you need to do this deposit or I'm going to give it to someone else. So this can be a fraud. This is a very red flag for fraud, but sometimes it's not a fraud. However, we definitely do not recommend to do any kind of payment, like I said before, having a contract or at least checking the AL property and so on. There is a lot of people that rent illegally, so to say. It's actually a very curious thing, because in Portugal, supposedly you do have to register the rental contract, but if you go and look at the statistics for rentals, you will see that the numbers are clearly very far off from reality. Because let's take Lisbon. And Lisbon has the highest registry of contracts in the country and has about 7,900 something contracts registered. Lisbon is a very big city. I'm pretty sure a lot more than 8,000 homes are rented, even if you take into consideration the AL that don't fall under this regime. So what happens is most people don't really register the contracts because they don't want to pay the taxes. This is not exactly a fraud. Well, it's a problem for the landlord, mostly. Landlords tend to pretend they have the power in this situation, but they really don't. Because if you rent a property and you have a contract and that contract is not registered, you can denounce it and you will not be kicked out. You can't legally. What will happen is that the landlord will pay a very heavy fine and will have to register the contract anyway. So not registering the contract is actually much more of a risk for the landlord than for the tenant. Of course, it can create a bad environment and a bad relationship with the landlord. But other than that, the bigger risk really is on the landlord. So it's a very common practice. Most of the clients, we have this issue because of the D7 visas. For the D7 visas, the contract needs to be registered. And often we have to go after the client, the landlords. Usually we just warn them and say, look, this is going to be reviewed by a public service, so make sure it's registered, otherwise there will be problems to you, and they end up doing it. But sometimes we really need to go after them to actually get them to register the things. So this is, like I said, it's not exactly a fraud, it's just something to be aware of. Another thing that you should be aware of is paying many months in advance. So the standard practice is to pay 1 to 2 months rent plus a security deposit that can also be equivalent to 1 or 2 months rent. So ideally, you shouldn't pay more than 4 months rent when making a contract, and that's already a fairly high value. However, because of the demand and because being foreign citizens, the landlords want to have as much guarantees as possible, and nowadays they often request for a guarantor and receipts of monthly income and all of that kind of stuff. Usually we can get around this by proving the income of our clients to the landlords, but sometimes they try and ask for a lot of months in advance. So when this happens, we don't really advise our clients paying more than 4 months. However, there have been situations where they have accepted doing that out of their own risk because they really wanted that property. The problem with doing this is, yes, it will be on the contract and so on, but if anything goes wrong and you want to leave before the months you paid, it will be very hard to get your money back because the courts in Portugal are very, very slow. And this is one of the big problems. It's very hard to get anything sorted out, being as a landlord or a tenant. It's the same. It's bad for both. Usually the best way to do things is just to reach an agreement. So if you have a problem, it's always better to just try and sort it out with your landlord. And if it's something that is just like 1 or 2 or 3 months of rent, usually it's really not worth the hassle of going to court, either for the landlords or the tenants. It's equal for both. And actually landlords tend to have a lot of problems on this when people stop paying rents. That's why they ask for so many verifications. So it can be tricky in that situation. It's a risk paying a lot of months in advance. It's not illegal, no, it will be on the contract. So technically you are secure, and if they honor their word, they will give it back according to the terms of contract. But it's always a big risk. And we definitely do not advise paying more than 6 months. Like 6 months, it's the absolutely maximum we advise to pay as entrance. Never pay a year. That's just a terrible idea. Just don't do that, because you will be stuck there if something happens, and it's very unlikely that they will be giving you the money back. So other than that, comparing the Portuguese market to the American market, one of the things it's just much less regulated. So there isn't that many things regulating the rental market at all. And like I said, one of the big culture clashes is the lack of conditions. And what happens is that the apartments that are truly new, with air conditioning, with good isolation, good furniture, are already directed to the luxury and foreign market. So they end up being much more expensive and pretty much unaffordable from a local perspective. So that is something that you will find pretty much everywhere, because the locals are willing to have much less conditions, while the foreigners are usually willing to pay to have better conditions. And that creates kind of a gap on the market on that regard. So I already went over the main things. The ALs without license, that are a big thing, but like I said, the risk is that you lose the money. Landlords pushing tenants into bidding wars and into paying faster because of demand. This can happen, and it's concerning and can be a red flag. Never rent before checking the property. Never pay before having a contract or checking the license. Be aware that the conditions of the rental market may not be what you are used to in your country. And like I say, there is a big gap from the properties that are acceptable from a local standpoint and the properties that are oriented towards a higher end market, and especially the foreign market. Paying more than 3-4 months in advance, that it's not very advisable. 6 months maximum, definitely not more than that. Unregistered contracts, like I said, it's illegal, but not necessarily a fraud. It's a fraud to the government, not a fraud to the tenant. The need of the registry can be for foreigners, mostly because of the D7 visa. For locals, if you have a contract register, you can discount as an expense on your IRS. So if you have an income in Portugal, it's definitely more advantageous to have a registered contract. And the only thing that I haven't mentioned in my list is subletting illegally. So this occasionally happens. Basically, people that are renting from other people and sublet illegally. This is fairly hard to detect, especially if there's a contract, but usually these people will not want to do a contract, which is obviously a red flag. What happens in this situation is that your contract won't be legal because it's not with the landlord. And I've come across a situation that this kind of the thing happened in a business property. So this person rented the property from someone that he thought was the owner, but turns out he was actually the tenant. And he didn't have any issues because the owners actually didn't check on the property until he had to do some alterations. It was a business property and had to go to the town hall with a contract to authorize those alterations. And in the town hall, they told him, look, this isn't legal because this person is not the actual owner of this building. So what happened there, the way to check this is to check who is on the registry of the property. So basically, it's usually on the rental contracts, you will have the registry number and the reference number of the property. If the reference number of the property is not there, it's also something to be concerned about. And you can check this for the licença permanente, certidão permanente, sorry. That is basically a state emitted document where it will tell you what's the area, what's if it's 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, when it was built, and who owns it. So usually this information is on the contracts, and you can check the certidão permanente to verify if everything is in accordance. So these are the main things to be aware of when renting. And I'm now going to go into buying. I don't know if anyone has any other questions about renting. If you do, please make them now. Otherwise, I'm going to go into the buying market where things are a bit more complicated.